Okay, today is May 18th, 2013, and I'm the interviewer. My name is Cindy Tippett, and I'm interviewing veteran Jeremiah Court Lapish. His birth date is May 23rd, May 28th, 1923. He's a veteran of the U.S. Navy, and he served in World War II. Good morning, Dad.
Good morning.
We're going to talk about your service today. So what I'd like you to do first is state your name and address.
Jeremiah Lapish. Live in Winthrop Harbor, 10th Street, 2612 10th Street.
Okay. All right, we're going to get started. We're going to talk about your service, and the first question is, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted in the Navy.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I had a full deferment. I was working for a Great Lakes Dredging Dock at Ludington, Michigan, building a new dock, and that for Dow Chemical. It was a war effort, and Great Lakes Dredging Dock got me deferment. I went home on one weekend and found out that 14 other schoolmates of mine and friends of mine were going to all enlist in the Navy before they got drafted and went in the Army.
Where were you living at the time?
Well, I was living in Alpena, Michigan,
Okay.
but I was working in Ludington, Michigan.
So when these 14 of your friends decided to enlist, what made you go along with them?
Well, I was raised on boats, and I wanted to be sure I got in the Navy, and I just thought I wanted to get into the action.
So how did it feel to go and enlist?
Well, I was enthused about it.
Okay. A little scared or
No,
no?
no.
Okay. And when you got to the enlistment center, what was that like?
We all went on a bus down to Detroit, Michigan, and they had a hotel on 4th Street in Detroit that we were all based in. When I got off the bus, the colonel of the Army was waiting for me and found out he was one of my ex-principals, and he took me out to his house for lunch that day.
So it made it kind of
But he brought me back, and the next day we got into going through the cleanup or finding what we were going to do.
Okay. So you had a choice on what you were going to do?
No, we did an inspection or
Like an evaluation? An evaluation?
well, yes, but more medical. We went through all
Okay.
the doctors and nurses and taking blood and everything.
Oh, the fun stuff. So where did you go from there? What happened after that?
Well, we went back to Alpena on the bus because they weren't ready for all of us that to do. So I went back to work for 2 weeks, and then we came home and we left Alpena on the train, and we went back to Detroit. But we met a lot of other cars, and when we went on the train, there was also drafted people with us. So we went down, and the Navy guys were all put in another train, and more people from joined the Navy or was drafted, and we went over to Waukee or Great Lakes Naval Training Station in North Chicago.
How was that?
Well, we got off the train, we walked in one of the old buildings there, and we were told to strip our clothes. And they gave us new clothes, bedding, mattresses, everything that we needed in sea bags. And we spent the night there, and the next day we were marched over to what is now
Camp Porter?
Hmm?
Porter? Where's that?
Porter, yes.
Camp Porter?
At that time, there was three places, three camps. There was Porter, Dewey, and another one I can't remember.
Okay.
Dewey?
Dewey, yeah.
A lot different than it is there today, huh?
Yes, the old buildings were all wooden. That, as a matter of fact, the barracks that we were put into, there was 125 of us. We were the first ones to use that barracks.
So, boot camp has a reputation for being a little tough, and that the
Well, they're teaching you to discipline and things like that. Because of the fact that I had worked on a vessel, tugs and that, I've already been through something like that, because it's the same thing when you're working in that kind of work.
Okay. So your drill instructor wasn't awful or terrible or
No, it you had to behave yourself and do what you were told and keep your mouth shut.
so how would you describe that experience?
Well, I think in the whole, it taught a lot of us a lot more thinking of what we were doing, and being more more definite in what we did.
Okay. Real deliberate. Is that what you were looking for? Deliberate? Is that what you were
Deliberate, yeah, and what you did, you knew that you were doing it right.
Okay. The picture that you showed me of the group of people, was that from boot camp?
Yes, this was our graduation picture. It was we were company 933. The chief commander was Evan W. Rowan. He was a chief SP, and we were on August 9th, 1943, we were graduated from the boot camp.
Did you form any friendships, good friendships with those people?
Well,
or
I
did you?
have 15 other or 14 other guys, and 13 other guys, because one of our my best friend failed and was a 4F and didn't get to go with us.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But there was others here.
Okay. Is there anything about that experience that stands out, or boot camp that stands out, that you'd like to share?
Well, I think it taught us all to be careful with each other, and not to and get into arguments and stuff like that.
Kind of stay united as a team, kind of work as a...
Right.
Okay. So you served in World War II. Where exactly did you go from boot camp then?
Well, from boot camp, I had a leave of absence. Went back home to meet my girlfriend, and after that, I came back to Great Lakes, and I went to service school there. I was the quartermaster school.
Okay. What was quartermaster school preparing you for?
Quartermaster school has taught us navigation, but I kind of had to jump on them because I was raised. My dad was a captain, a tug captain, and I worked with him. I knew all about direct navigation and things like that. Matter of fact, the teacher of the class, who was he was a history teacher, and he was teaching out of a book. And when we got into the navigation part, I was able to help. I knew more about lining up beams and to get your positions on the water and how to do bearings and that, and that he didn't know. So I was able to help some of the other class, and I got out with good marks.
So the Navy was just such a natural fit.
Yes.
Okay. So after you go to quartermaster school, what happens?
Well, when we finished quartermaster school, and I was raised to quartermaster third class, he took me over to the training center commander, Lieutenant Slickfick. His thing was he was the fastest typer in the United States at that time. But they tried to talk me into staying and teaching that, and I said no, I wanted to go. So I got the opportunity to pick where I wanted to go, and I was okay for PT boats or submarines, and I picked PT boats.
Sounds like a good choice. So once you pick the PT boats, do you go to another school then?
Yes. After I left, I had another short leave, a week, and then I went to Boston and was in the Fargo building in Boston. That was a Navy center going through, and I went through two things there. We went through a class that kind of figured out if we were going to be suitable for PTs, because it's a short, everybody's got to work together. And also I went through radar school there.
Can you I'm gonna back up here just a little bit. When you chose PTs, can you tell us what that meant? What is a PT boat? What is...
Well, a PT boat was actually a patrol torpedo boat, and the idea was that they would go out and drop torpedoes and that. But as it turned out, we had very little ammunition on our guns on us to start with, but we became a heavier armed vessel down the line.
Okay.
But they were a wooden vessel. They were made out of mahogany plywood, a 1/4 inch thick, and it was double mounted on the beams and that of the boat, and they was a 1/4 inch of plywood running from the gunnel down to the chime of the boat, from the aft end down, and then they put a layer of canvas on over that and glued it to it. Then they would run another plank down from the gunnel down to the chime, and it made like an X to give the stiffness to the boat.
Were they dependable, reliable boats?
Yes, they were. They were very surprising how much power pounding they would take.
Okay. So, and you knew about these PT boats before you enlisted, or did you think you'd get on a...
Yes, we knew that because it was a PT boats that took General MacArthur off the Corregidor and got him out of there when the Japanese attacked.
Okay, so so you've gone to Boston, and you finished that school. What happens then?
Well, from Boston, I went down to Melville, Rhode Island, and that was where the PT training center was. and we went through training on in the first part was we went in. We had to learn at least 5 different things besides our own. In other words, I was a quartermaster, but I had to know how to handle guns, clean a gun. We had to do radio. We had to do some work on the engines that were used on them and things like that.
So you had to be able to multi.
Right. The idea was that we were the original. There was only going to be 9 enlisted men on each PTs, but eventually they got up to where we had like 18 or 19. And that didn't include the 2 officers.
Okay. Were you all in school? Was your crew in school together, or you just learn these and then you're put on a crew, or how'd that work?
What they did was they when we got there, all of us quartermaster, we had a Quonset hut that we lived in, and there was I think about 12 of us that were quartermasters. We also had some motor mechs in there, motor machinist mates, and we also had radio people in that. Where there was 4 different ranks that were in the same
same class, the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And that brought us into being more. I think they did this so that they find out if we were able to put up with each other.
Yeah, because I imagine that was pretty close quarters.
Yes.
So, when do you actually get on a PT boat?
Well, after about 6 weeks of training and classes, then we started to go out on the boats and do training on the boats.
Okay. And where was this training done?
We were going out of Melville, Rhode Island, out into past Newport, into the ocean there, off of Block Island.
Okay. Did your training prepare you for what you got into later?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. So they had it all down pat, knew exactly what you needed to know.
Well, most of the trainers, the guys that were training us and that, had been out in the Pacific, in the actual using the boats as war boats.
Okay, so they were not teaching from a book; they were teaching from experience. Right. Okay. So, what happened after all that training was completed?
Well, after we training, we also did some coastal work. There was, as the ships that were coming back from taking stuff over to England and that, when they came back and they came into port, we helped them in the port. We kind of protected them, supposedly, from being German submarine hitting them.
Okay. Did that ever happen, or were you
No,
involved in any of that?
I don't know what. It was just something we did. Actually, we had no way of knowing it. The only thing the Jap would have to show us, or German would have to show us, so that we could drop a depth charge. We had depth charges, but we didn't have any way of hearing where the submarines were.
So what happened after that?
Well, after that, we were there was a bunch of us got together, or were put together, and we were scheduled to go down to New Orleans or Lake Pontchartrain and pick up a PT boat crew down there. But before we got started, or we were on our way down. We got as far as New York, and they sent us back because they had taken the boats that we were supposed to have and given them to the Russians.
Why would they give them to the Russians?
Well, they needed the boats too, I guess.
Okay.
But And we came back, and then there was about 350 of us, because there was some of the group that graduated after us. We went by train out to San Francisco, troop train.
Okay.
What kind of train? Did you say? What kind of train?
Troop.
Troop train. Got it.
Troop train. Oh. Oh. And so you went to San Francisco. Is that where you?
Yes, we were on Treasure
Flight from?
Treasure Island, which was the Navy base there. We were out just upstream from Alcatraz, but we were there for about 2 or 3 weeks. I was and then we were loaded aboard the Matson ship, Queen of Ships, USS Lurline.
USS what?
Lurline.
Lurline. Okay.
Lurnig. I was assigned. I was lucky. Our bunks and that, where we were stationed, was right in the grand ballroom of the Lurline, and but it was all cleared out. We had bunks 4 bunks high. But I was a quartermaster, and I was assigned to the stand watch on the bridge of the ship, and we departed San Francisco and headed for Brisbane, Australia, and I stood watch up on the quarter deck, and every time we would make a change, I had the straight line that we were going to take from San Francisco to Brisbane, but if we'd shoot off to the right and then back to the left, and that every once in a while we thought submarines might be around. But at night we usually went straight on the line. But I had to record all that on a book, and navigation book.
Okay. You didn't have computers back then, huh? Everything was done by hand?
Yes.
Okay. What happened with these logs or whatever? Were you the only one in this book, or was it an ongoing?
Well, there was 3 of us, out of our quartermasters, that were on that watch. One of us, we stayed 8 hours, another one 8 hours, and so on. But the good part of that was the fellows that weren't assigned to something like that, they only got to eat twice a day. Once in the morning, ours would be been about 10 o'clock in the morning, and then they'd get supper about 8 o'clock at night. But we got to eat with the crew, and so we got 3 meals a day.
Oh, okay. How long did the trip take you?
Let's see, we crossed the equator, and of course that we got changed days. We were about 7 days
7 days.
making it to Brisbane.
Okay. When you crossed the equator, I saw you got a little certificate for that.
Yes.
What was that about?
Well, when you cross the equator, you get the
Order of the Deep, did it say?
Right. Yeah, the order.
Okay, so everybody on the boat gets.
Everybody in the boat got one. Yeah.
Oh, that was fun.
They put a deal on one of the crew of the boat comes up with a costume on it, and night shoe.
So it's a lot of fun.
Yes.
It's something to make the trip enjoyable,
Yes.
as enjoyable as can be.
Right.
So now you're in Australia. What happens from there?
We got off the boat in Brisbane, and a day or 2 later, we got on a Australian coastal boat, and we went up to Melanie Bay, New Guinea, and it was quite a trip. We got hard-boiled egg for breakfast, and we got spinach and I forget what else was at night, but we only got 2 meals a day on there.
Wow.
But we were only less than two days getting to Melanie Bay.
Okay. So is that where you picked up your boat?
No, we were dropped off in Milne Bay, and we were flown by plane from there up to Finch Haven on New Guinea, and by an army plane. It was kind of a thing as they were landing at Finch Haven. We were on it was just a wasn't a passenger train or plane. It was a cargo plane, so we had to sit down on the deck to get there, and we heard this clack clack and clack clack, and we couldn't figure out what it was. After we landed, the pilot told us that a Jap plane had tried to shoot us down as we were landing.
Oh my
and they
goodness.
had hit the wings, but
Wow.
didn't hurt. So that was a little wake up.
Kind of your introduction to
Yeah.
the
And,
zone, huh?
when I got there, well, then I was assigned to the PT boat 128 in Ron 7.
So Ron 7 was like your squadron?
That was the squadron. Yeah, the Navy or the PT boats or any Navy, they just say Ron and leave the squadron part off.
Oh, okay. So that's when you meet your crewmates.
Right.
And how was that?
Well, there was a fairly good change of. I think there was 5 or 6 of us that went on the 128 boat, and those fellows got to go home. But we fit right in and worked out fine. Our skipper, his name was Azorigen, and he was a good skipper.
Is Ridgeon?
Azorigen. Don't. I can't spell it anymore.
Okay.
I did then because I had to write his name all the time.
Yeah.
So when did you start to see action? When did you start?
The next night.
The next night.
Yeah, the next night we went out for patrol. We were patrolling what they call a tapi. It's where the Japanese had about 40,000 people on that, and we were working out of a tapi, and we only had to go probably 15 miles down to where they were and patrol along there, watch for barges and stuff like that. The first night we saw 2 barges, and
What would these barges have?
these were the Japanese were trying to get. They have the troops of 40,000 troops, Jap troops. They couldn't get. The Japs were trying to get supplies into them
Okay.
and backup, and they were trying to get a general out of there. And so as we patrolled along, there was 2 boats traveling most of the time side by side or close to each other, and we'd make a run along about probably about a quarter of a mile, maybe half a mile. We'd kind of, and the other boat to the north of us, the other boat to the south of us, we'll say, we would kind of meet, and if we saw somebody, then we'd radio them and tell them where there was barges or.
Okay. So you get this boat and you've got this crew and you start right away. What battles or what other action did you guys see?
Well, that was most of it was they were trying to get supplies and into them. They were, first little bit they were using Jap destroyers to try and get them in there, stuff in. They'd bring them in close by, and then barges would go out and they'd load the stuff in the barges. So we were trying to break that up.
And how would you accomplish that?
Um, well, if we could see the destroyers, get to them first, we'd try to fire torpedoes at them. The barges, we would use our guns, and at that time we only had a 20 millimeter on the bow and a 20 millimeter on the stern. We had twin 50s and machine guns and turrets, and we had one 30 caliber gun on the wing of the bridge, and we would use those to fire at them.
If you're firing at them, are they firing back at you?
Usually there was like if there was 4 barges or 5 barges, one of the barges would be a barge that was carrying ammunition or carrying guns and that to protect us, and that was one of those barges that they used for bringing troops in or out.
Okay.
So they had guns and they could fire back at us too.
Okay. So your boat was never sunk or hit or?
No, we got a couple of hits once in a while, but one night later, about we were 2 boats that would be covering an area. One boat would go out offshore about 1.5 miles, and we would have our dinner, and then we would come back in, and the other one would go out. And this one night we went out, and we were about 1.5 miles or 1.25 miles offshore, and eating our lunch, dinner, and they fired a 75 millimeter from shore at us and went through the bow of the boat. One of our crew was sitting on the throne down in there, and it went right through under his legs, and he was pretty badly hurt. But it was a armor piercing, and it didn't explode until it got through the boat.
Oh, wow. That's luck. Luck is as lucky as you can be, right?
Yeah.
In that experience?
The thing was that when we were out on general quarters like that, we weren't supposed to be, and nobody was supposed to go below deck, but he got the call.
So during combat, how long were you on this boat in combat?
Well, we'd go up about every second night or third night, depending. We would go out and patrol, and then we'd come back in the morning, and we would have a short nap, sleep, and then before noon we'd all get up, and we had to break our guns down, clean our guns up, go ashore or go up to the at that case we had a tender there. We'd have to go up to the tender and tie up to her and get our ammunition to fill in what we used the night before, and that was all had to be done in the afternoon. Then we had that night off, but if there was a call that they thought there was a submarine or a destroyer coming in then we might get called out the next night. If they didn't have that, then we'd have a night off.
So no set hours. It's not like a 9 to 5 job.
No.
Okay.
No, most of the time there, and at that time we were doing patrols mostly at night because the Japanese airplanes were watching overhead during the day, but we just have to go out just before dark. We'd leave our base and go out on the run, and then in the morning, as soon as it started to get daylight, we'd run back.
So when you were not out on patrol and you had these nights off, what would a typical night off be?
Well, most of us would write letters and lay, play cards and stuff like that. Or, after you'd been out on patrol for probably 12 hours without any sleep at night, you were looked for a night off to rest too.
So when you wrote these letters, I'm assuming that's how you kept in touch with the people back home?
Yes. We had what we called, and if I remember right, it was a victory letter. And you could fold it all up. It was square. You fold it all up, and it was, you could write in it, and then lick it and put it down, and then write who you were sending it to, and put it in the mail.
So how often did you get mail? Or were you able to send these letters?
It varied. When I got over there, I was probably over a month before I got my first letter. But sometimes later, when we were moving around more, we might get a letter that was sent in, we'll say, the month of August, and the next day we'd get one that was sent in July.
Oh, okay.
It was very odd. And one of my duties, I was made crew chief of the boat eventually. We're there, and one of my duties was everybody that wrote a letter had to give it to me, and I would make sure that they weren't sending anything home that was relay where we were or anything like that.
Okay.
I usually wrote a letter every night that we were on patrol, sent home to my girlfriend.
Okay.
Your mother.
How did the letters from home affect you when you got those?
Well, it was always something that we really look forward to, and when you got them, you sit down and read them over and over again. It was just making you feel good.
Good. Yeah. So, when you're, you said you were in New Guinea at that point?
Yes, we were at Taping, New Guinea.
Okay, so did you go anywhere after that or other than that?
Well, we made another, while we were there, actually, they made another attack on the Jap crew, or just north of where we were, and we went in and laid down with our PT boats. We had rocket launchers on the boat, and we would go in ahead of the barges that were bringing the soldiers ashore, and lay down the shoreline and back with their rockets and also with our guns, so they could land and get ashore. And we'd sometimes stand by there for a while, so if they got fire from someplace, we could fire back at them.
Did you have any casualties during your time on the boat?
Just the one. The fellow he wasn't killed, but he was hurt pretty bad on the throne.
Okay.
We never saw him again.
Did you have anything? Were you in any conflicts that you were awarded any medals or citations or?
Well, eventually we got the Navy unit citation for our work in New Guinea.
Okay. How did you get those? Was it a ceremony or did
No, it was just, there was not much of a ceremony. The commander, I can't think of his name right now, that came down and gave us the information and saluted us. And that.
Was that a motivator for your crew? I mean, were the
Well, but by the time we got that, we were getting ready to leave New Guinea to go up to the Philippines.
Oh, so what did you do up in the Philippines?
Well, before we went up to the Philippines, we went up to Mayas Windy, which is an island off of New Guinea, and we did rehab on our boats. We got new our boats were powered by
Was it like a diesel engine or like,
no, they were gasoline Packards,
Hmm.
Packard engines, and they were actually an airplane engine that the German or English had, and turned it into a marine engine. Our original ones were 1,350 horsepower, and just before we went to up to the Philippines, we got new ones that were 1,500 horsepower. Gave us more power because we also added a 40 millimeter gun on our stern, and we added 220 millimeters in between where the torpedoes were on each side. Between those, they mounted a gun there. We also had an 81 millimeter. Before that, we had an 81 millimeter rocket, or not.
like a machine gun or
No, it was a
rocket launcher? Or?
no. It's a tube. It's like they use for the 4th of July.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, launcher. You know, and we would launch when we were looking at going after these barges. We would fire one of these rockets, and it would go up and with a flare on it and a little light up the sky over the barges we were so we could see them, but they couldn't see us.
Oh. Okay. So, in the Philippines, did you continue doing the same type of work?
Well, we left Mayas Windy, and before one of the things we got before we left Mayas Windy was Bob Hope and his troop came out, and we got the pleasure of going over and picking them up off the mainland and bringing them out, and they put on a show for us. We didn't have Bob Hope on our boat, but we had as a companion. I can't remember his name now, but he was a joker and that.
Yeah.
And they put on a wonderful show for us. And they're I can't. One of the dancer was there, a real popular girl. But that was the big thing. So we left Mayas Windy, and we went up to the Halmaheras, which had just been taken by the American Army, and waited there, and we left there, went out and joined the convoy that was going up to the Philippines, and we traveled up there at a 10-mile-an-hour rate. We would have to, about every third day or so, we would have to go up behind one of the tenders and take on fuel. We burned 110 octane gas, so it was kind of a touchy thing.
Mm-hmm.
I got some pictures here of the refueling, and we worked our way up to towards the Philippines. The night before we were to reach the Philippines, our boat took some Army from the 31st Division. I don't know how they got over off the ship they were on, but there was 8 of them, I believe, that came over to our boat, and we took them on up ahead, and we landed on an island just south of Lady in the night, and I got to go ashore because I could do the signaling with the blinker, and we went ashore to so they could get the guerrillas, the Filipino guerrillas, set up, know we were coming, and we took some ammunition and some guns with us to give to them, and we spent that day and the next and that night and the next day morning the ships with the convoy caught up with us, and that was the day we landed in Leyte. I think it was the 27th or something of October. It was late in October.
Okay. That was in October?
Yes.
Okay. And you had only finished boot camp in August, so this was a lot
No,
going.
no.
Oh,
That
this
was a
is
year
a
away.
year. Okay.
Yeah, this
Okay.
was. Now we're in 1944.
Okay. Okay. I was thinking, wow, that's a lot to do in such a little time. So now you're up there. Does the crew change, or
No.
the crew
No.
stays the same?
We got in there in the morning, fairly early in the morning. The unbeknownst to us, or at least I didn't know it, there was 3 battleships of our battleships that had been there the night before and were shooting and strafing the Tacloban area of the Philippines, preparing us for them to come in. So we spent the most of the day there, seeing the barges with the soldiers on, got ashore, and we stood by and kind of protected them from any. But there was an airfield right there that they wanted and took. That night, we were laying off probably 1,000 feet offshore. About the 3 battleships. There was the one we were on was the Texas, which was a World War I battleship, but she still had 16-inch guns, and they lined us PT boats up in front of them. We anchored out so that we were laying length like them, and they were firing over us all night. We didn't sleep much, but the idea was that the Japanese had a lot of suicide boats, and they were a small boat, probably about 20 foot long, maybe a little longer, and they had a bow on them with a bullet. Dynamite in it, and they would go out and run into it. And see, that was the idea. We had to watch all night to keep them from getting through to the battleships.
Wow.
But none of them tried to get through on that night.
Yeah. So the Japanese used a lot of that suicide.
Yes.
You always hear about their
Right.
pilots that were suicide bombed. You made mention that you didn't know. Was where you were going and what you were doing well known to the crew, or was that kind of a skipper's?
Once we got left Halmahera, we all knew where we were going. Yeah.
Okay.
But until then, we kind of surprised, guessed
Surmised
on
it,
that. But
yeah.
no, it wasn't very.
It was a need-to-know basis?
Yeah.
Okay. Were there any other experiences in the Philippines that are memorable or you'd like to talk about?
Well, after shortly after we landed there, the Japanese sent 3 fleets down to try and take the area, drive us out of there. There was aircraft carriers that was off, and some others, but the main force was the Japanese battleships and cruisers. They came up through, came down and were supposed to come up through Sarajevo Straits. Well, that we decided that. So all the PT boats, there were about 39 or 40 of us, were sent back down to the entrance of the Sarajevo Straits, which was south of the Lady, and it was a fairly narrow straits, and we were the first boats to hit the Japanese battleships when they come up through there. The largest battleship in the world at that time had 20-inch shells, was one of the Japanese ships that came up through there. But the idea was that we wouldn't attack them until they got into the straits, because then they couldn't turn around very easy, and that. Mm-hmm. Also, they could only coming straight up to, and they took all the American battleships and cruisers and laid it across the upper where the straits ended up in the Lady Gulf, and so they could fire shells from the front, the back, the sides, all over. Mm. And it's what they call crossing the T. The Japanese had to cross the T, and we were one of the first boats. I don't remember. We were laying behind an island. We went up in the daylight, laid behind this island, and then when it got dark, we saw the ships coming in. We went out and tried to torpedo them and get them around. The 130 boat that we were with, one of us, got out and got underneath a cruiser, and he was right up against the cruiser almost, and just behind the wake, and they couldn't bring their guns down to fire him, but they had small arms up on top of it, but they had enough arms that they could keep them back. They tried to put the searchlight on them, and they shot the searchlight out, and we were standing just away from them, and so we came down, opened our smoke screen, and came down alongside of going the opposite way, and laid the smoke screen so that the 130 boat could fall in behind us, and then we went down and with the smoke screen, but we peeled off the smoke screen once we got by, and they were firing into the smoke screen, but we weren't there.
Boy, it sounds like a real game of strategy.
Yeah. Well, the guys on the 130 boat said they could hear them talking yelling up on the deck of the Japanese. They were that close.
Wow. Wow, that had to be terribly scary. That's.
But anyway, we don't know. We fired torpedoes, but our torpedoes weren't not what they should have been, and sometimes they dive and they wouldn't go, or they would, and but we know there was one explosion on a cruiser. It turned out later, but we don't know which boat fired it and hit it. But it did stop that, and it interrupted the whole process that the Japanese were figuring. So they turned around and came back out. And of course, the battleships up there were firing down on them too.
Yeah.
Once they got past us, we were in radio contact to the north, and once they got past us, then they started firing at them.
How long does this whole thing last? Is this hours?
It lasted all that night, okay. And the next morning. What I forgot to tell you was that the night before we went to the Sarajevo Straits, I was on the 128 boat, as quartermaster, but the quartermaster on the 132 boat got sick and had to go they took him over to a destroyer because I think he was having appendix failure. Anyway, I was transferred over to the 132 boat because the skipper on there was one of the lead skippers, and he wanted somebody that could read the signals and stuff. So I was on the 132 boat that night.
Oh, okay. So did you stay on the 132 then? Or?
Yeah, the 132 boat that night when we got next morning, we got done that night. The next morning, we were going back up to Lady, and we had stopped, as it turned out, for some reason, at one of the islands to pick some gorillas up, and we were going along there, and I had been at the wheel the boat for 36 hours, and the radio operator had been down in the chart house watching the radar, and of course now this radar was not the radars we got today. We could see about maybe 12 miles out on something was there, but we could no way of figuring it. It also was only horizontal. It wasn't nothing up in the air. We couldn't see any planes or anything like that. And so the skipper told me that my knees were swelling up and that. He said, "Why don't you go down and put your foot up on the desk and watch the radar?" And Gibson can come up. He was the radio man. He can come up and sit behind us here because he said he couldn't. His eyes were bored.
Yeah.
And so we were going along. The sun was just coming up good, and a Jap float plane came in over out of the sun and dropped the daisy cutter right off our side of our boat. And as I say, I had my feet up on the desk, chart house desk. There were 32 pieces of shrapnel went through the chart house desk under my legs, and I didn't get hit.
Wow.
The motor mech, Dewey Heiner, was down in the engine room. He happened to drop a wrench, and he bent over to pick it up, knocked the port and the center engine out, two engines out. We only had one engine. But Dewey and I were the only ones in the boat that didn't get hit.
Wow.
And one of the fellows in here, I have a thing here that he wrote, was on Hopkins. He was nicked, but we had the skipper was killed. The shrapnel took his head off, and the executive officer was hurt bad. He got a piece in his back. We had about 16 people that were hurt, and I had one thing they taught us in PT school was to be able to do things like that, give them morphine and that. I never thought I'd be able to do it, but I was doing it that day, and I radioed Mayday, and a destroyer came over, came down to us very fast too, and they had 3 Navy planes overhead of us that in a very short time protect us.
Yeah.
But we could only go along on one engine, so we limped home.
Wow.
But and for the rest, the boat, we had no way of repairing it. We didn't have any way of lifting it out there. The tender that we had couldn't lift the boat. These boats weighed 50 ton,
Yeah.
and they didn't have any engines for us to repair. So I went back and forth between the 132 boat and the 128. When the 128 went out on patrol, I went with them. We did have a quartermaster striker on the 128 boat. That's why I got sent over. They had them there. About, it must have been, it was in November. The 120, I went out with the 128 boat, and we went over around Lady and up to Ormoc Bay, which was on the other side of where the troops had landed. There was a mountain there, and we went into after that. We got the 138 boat, or 132 boat back in operation, and we worked. I got pictures here of us going into Subic Bay, or over another island, and we took some president of the school over there, college, and his family off, and brought him over on that. But then we went up to Subic Bay and made the landing there, and we worked around the into Manila Bay, Corregidor, past Corregidor. We landed some troops, but when they made the back on Corregidor, they brought aircraft parachute people in, and they dropped parachute people down on the island, and we were picking the ones that didn't hit the island. We were picking up
out of the water.
But we got to help General MacArthur go back on Corregidor.
Cool, cool. Like you were part of history there.
And after that, we did another before we went up. We did another overhaul on the boat, and one thing I did there after we got Corregidor, we went in. They dropped parachutes on the St. Thomas prison, wasn't a prison. The Japanese made it a prison. That's where all the people from the Bataan Peninsula March were held, and we went up and hadn't taken Manila yet, but they had enough of the parachute troop and that they got a line through, and we went in and brought all those prisoners out and onto our boats, and we took the boat took them out to the hospital ship. It was these guys come out, and people that were as big as I am, and they're you can see their bones through their skin, and that they were so deprived. But and then we left there and we went down to Mindoro, which was way down south of the south end of the Philippines, and made that headquarters there. That's where Zamboanga is. And we went down, did some patrolling in Borneo. But that's where I was when they dropped the bombs, atomic bombs. The day before they dropped the atomic bombs, I got my orders to go back home. I had 30 days leave, 30 days travel to get home, and then when I was to report to Bayonne, New Jersey, and pick up a new squadron of boats, and we were going to do a tour of the Great Lakes to raise money war bonds and that. But when they bombed or dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, everything was cut off. And the way it ended up, instead of me going home, all the rest of the crew on the boat got to go home except Dewey Heiner and I. We were the two oldest guys on the boat then, and senior. We were declared needed to take the boats back to be dismantled, and we went back to Samar and took the boat back, and we took all the engines and everything out of them, and they burned them. And I was ready to come home, and after the boat went back to Subic Bay to catch a ship back home. And when I went to go aboard the ship, they didn't have any record of me. It was several of us that didn't have it, all within the 132 and the 131 boat. And come to find out, one of the fellows that went in the Navy with us back in boot camp, he ended up in PTs too, only he was a yeoman on shore. And he lost our records, so he re-enlisted in the Navy, and he got an immediate transfer back home. And he went home and asked Rosemary to marry him, but she turned him down, and I got home and I married her. I did come down with malaria, though. I stopped taking the Atibrin when I was going to board the ship the first time, and I ended up with malaria, so I had to walk aboard the other ship. I was supposed to be in the hospital, but I got on board, and that's what I got to see. I turned myself in.
In my generation's idea of coming home from World War II is the sailor with the nurse, the kiss, the big homecoming. Was that what it was like when you came home?
Yes, actually, when we were laying up in Civic Bay, that hospital ship I told you was there, and also earlier in Lady Bay, the hospital ship, and there was nurses on them and that, and we used to go over with our PT boats and then pick up some of the nurses and take them for a boat ride.
So, how would you say that your service and these experiences affected your life after the war?
Well, it helped me some, but I came back home and went back to sailing on tugboats and stuff and diving and that. And, I think the discipline had something to help there.
Okay. When in years beyond the service, did you ever go to any reunions or join any of the organizations?
I belong to the PT Boat Association. Our headquarters is in Germantown, Tennessee. It's a suburb of Memphis. I'm a plank holder. We all chipped in and got a PT boat and fixed it up. It is Fall River, Massachusetts, Battleship Cove. That's where the Battleship Massachusetts, the destroyer Kennedy, and submarine is. They got some other small, but we've got two PT boats there. We had two PT boats. There was the Higgins boat, which was not as popular as Elko, and the Elko boat, and I was on an Elko boat. But we got those there. Some of the guys go over there every year and act as people directly come through.
Tour, like a tour guide type?
Yeah, tour guides, that's what I'm trying to say. And on the Battleship Massachusetts, we have a room on there that we have a museum and that. I've got some pictures here we can leave.
Okay. So you've attended reunions?
Yeah, well, Mother and I went over there for that reunion, okay. And we went to Boston and had a reunion there, and then we went down. But for the opening of the new boat, PT boat.
Okay. Did you stay in touch with any of the guys that you knew in the service?
A little bit back and forth, but we traveled so much. For 14 years, we were never any place for over a year. We were in the traveling around for the different jobs and that. And I kind of lost track with them, but we did through the PT Boat Association.
Is there anything you'd like to add or want people to know about about the service and that we didn't cover in the interview?
You know, I'm very proud to be a member of the PT boats. It was the only the PT boats and the submarines were the only ships or anything in the Navy that you had to
Volunteer?
yeah, you to join. You just couldn't be sent there without you wanted
Oh,
to
you
be
had
there.
like qualify. You had
Well,
Okay.
well, not qualifying, but you know, it was just, you had to want to go there.
yeah. Well, a lot of people didn't fit in those submarines.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we thank you, and this is a great part of history, and I'm proud of you.